Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys so much for dropping into our workshop this morning. Today, Julie and I are going to be covering how to kind of adapt Overture to your chapter and make it your own within kind of the standardized curriculum of Overture. Yeah, so I just want to start off. We're going to introduce ourselves real quick. My name is Caitlin Riggio. I am the current Northeast District Vice President for Membership, and I am a recent graduate and life member of the Eta Gamma chapter at Boston University.
Hi, I'm Julia Robles. I'm the Western District Vice President of Membership, and I am a life member at CSU Fresno, the Eta Omega chapter.
Yeah, so before we get rolling into the actual content of the workshop, we're going to take a quick look at what we're going to be covering over the course of the workshop today. So by the time you leave here today, you'll know about the basics of Overture, including why we use Overture as an organization. You'll have some new ideas for how to adapt Overture to fit the needs of your chapter as well as your membership class. And we're also going to give you some pointers on how to be a good membership educator for that new class that you're bringing in. We're also going to touch on some do's and don'ts of your MEP, as well as how to submit changes if you need to do some course correcting or pivoting in the middle of your membership education process. So first, we're going to start with some basic info about kind of why we have Overture within TB Sigma. So Overture was developed as a sort of standardized curriculum to ensure that membership education for membership candidates was equal across every chapter across the entire nation within TB Sigma. So basically, under Overture, whether you're a membership candidate at the University of Maine or UCLA, you'll be learning the same information at roughly the same pace. So also, in addition to that, the Overture curriculum addresses areas of education that were historically missing from membership education in the past. For example, the current curriculum takes time in Module 1 to really break down our mission statement as an organization and highlight how that connects to our goal of providing really exceptional service to college bands. It also highlights some of the diversity within our organization and highlights some really important milestones from chapters all across the nation. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, Overture serves as a risk management tool, with Module 0 focusing very heavily on the sorority's risk management policies and anti-hazing policies, and giving new members kind of that insight before they get rolling in the membership education process.
So starting out, a lot of our resources are online, and if you have any questions, most of them can be answered by simply going to tpsigma.org/policies regarding a lot of the foundation for like partially why we do Overture, but mostly just that all that risk management stuff. There are 2 documents that give your candidates Overture candidate workbook, which we have online as well on that tpsigma.org. And the membership education plan, which is something that your chapter works on and gets approved by nationals, and make sure that everything is out in the open and that your candidates, your actives, your counselors, and the national org knows what you're doing. And of course, we have the guidance in Overture VPM guide. So there's a guide for the actual membership educator, and there are tons of resources and general guidelines for how to do Overture in there. And so it's a really good read when you're starting out and you're feeling nervous about how to teach.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to interject here too. Mom hat putting back on here. So when we talk about using the policies as a risk, or the Overture as a risk management tool as well, that helps us to understand like what is going on in your membership process, and helps us to also help you to avoid any situations that could jeopardize your chapter status on your campus, in your community, and with a national organization. So in our past class or our class session, we did talk about your membership education plan, talking about submitting your ceremonies and your whole timeline and all the activities that you're doing in your membership process. With using Overture, it helps us to understand how you're teaching your membership candidates, what you're teaching them, just to make sure that there's no harm being done, and also so that you have a great resource so that you as a membership educator can just teach the information and instead of having to really struggle through finding it. So we're here, this tool's for you to help you be successful. And as a note, there's been a lot of changes happening to Overture. So what you're currently seeing on our website is the 2021 version of Overture, and the 2022 version will be available in the next few weeks with a lot of new information. So be on the lookout.
So things that we look for with this, with how Overture is constructed, is it helps us organize a couple things, including the length of process. There are 8 modules, including the module 0, and there is flexibility to, with your chapter, change the length of the process from 4 to 12 weeks. There are guidelines for meeting times. No membership activities can take place before 8 a.m. nor after 10 p.m. And if you really have to push it, at 10:30 is like really a kind of hard set deadline. The MEP again would contain your ritual dates and times of events, new member presentation shows and rehearsals if you would be doing those, and requirements for candidates, including service events, fundraisers, interviews, class officer responsibilities, and these things would be outlined in your MEP, and along would be in agreement with what Overture allows for you, and the general guidance of trying not to have your meetings be longer than 90 minutes, just because this is not your, something at least at my school we say is that you are majoring in your major, not in TBS, and so we don't want to take too much time out of your day, out of your week to do this, though we do want you to be prepared to be good members of the sorority.
Yeah, so one thing that's really important to remember is because Overture is a standardized curriculum, you're tailoring it to your chapter doesn't come so much from what you teach, it comes from how you teach it. And that's something you should keep in mind when creating, or more importantly, maintaining resources for your membership education process. So when you're planning an MEP and kind of tailoring it to your chapter, especially if you're a new VPM for your chapter, it might seem a little bit overwhelming at first. But you shouldn't feel pressured to start from scratch every single year, especially when the curriculum is more or less the same from year to year. So don't reinvent the wheel. Don't start from scratch every year. Use resources left behind from your past VPMs in order to guide your planning as you're getting ready to bring your new membership class in. So what's helpful to do is to review what other VPMs did in the past and assess what worked and what didn't work, and look at what you can tweak to better fit either your teaching style, what your incoming class looks like, what your current chapter dynamic looks like. In that case, it could be really helpful to set up, in addition to looking at past resources, really setting up a solid transition meeting with your past VPM and really hashing out what worked and what didn't work and how you can incorporate that feedback into bringing in your new membership class. So a big way that you can maintain your current resources and not start from scratch every year is by utilizing templates. For example, chapter VPMs need to submit and get MEPs approved every single year, every single membership cycle that you go through. So by looking at past MEPs that were approved in the past, you can get a pretty good idea of what's needed in an MEP when it's time for you to make one yourself. From there, you can make updates as needed and tweak it and alter it to fit your needs. In addition, you can look and see what either the district or the national level has on hand. I believe it's nationally available. There is a MEP template that comes kind of preloaded with a lot of the information that would look the same regardless of what chapter you're a member of. This is things like a background in the history of the sorority, our national policies on things like hazing and alcohol and things along those lines. Those are things that are going to be the same from along those, like all across the nation. So there's no need to alter that to fit your need if it's all going to be the same. But then in addition to that, there are also pre-built sections within this template where you can easily insert things that do change from chapter to chapter, like information about your university and your band program, policies about bigs and littles within your chapter, fundraisers or service projects if that's something you require from your membership class. It's not required that you use a template like this, but it will definitely help you make your life a little bit easier, help save some time when you're putting an MEP together, and alleviate some of the stress that would come from building an MEP from the ground up. And I think it looks like Siobhan just dropped a link to the MEP template in there, so that is at your disposal if that is something that you want to utilize as you are working toward putting your MEP together. On a similar note, if you're an outgoing VPM, save the work that you did during your term in office in an easily accessible place for your next VPM and for VPMs down the line. A common way that a lot of chapters do this, I'm aware of, is a Google Drive, but this can look like a OneDrive. It can look like a flash drive with all of the MEP information on there. Basically anything else that you find that is easy to pass down from person to person, year to year, that people can look back on when they need a little bit of guidance on what they're doing. It's especially helpful for things like MEPs or supplemental activity submissions if you're the kind of chapter that does similar activities from year to year and you want to reuse those submissions from year to year. As a side note, if you can't find your past MEPs for some reason, please connect with your district counselors or your district VPMs. They should be able to send it your way. I know personally, I know I have all of the MEPs from the past couple of years in my Google Drive. So if you're having trouble finding it, be sure to connect with your district officials and they should be able to help you out with that. In addition to things that you can do as a VPM to make your MEP planning process a little easier, as Siobhan mentioned a bit earlier, there are a couple changes coming to Overture down the line as a whole within the curriculum that should make your life a little bit easier in terms of planning. So some of the things that are being updated within the next cycle that should be dropping in a couple weeks. The window for MEP submissions has been extended a little bit, so you now have from June 1st, which was a couple weeks ago, all the way through the June 15th deadline to submit your MEPs to the district. So this is helpful because it should give you a little bit more time to connect with your district VPMs or counselors ahead of time if you have some questions, if you need assistance with anything. And also it gives you a little bit more time to submit it ahead of time and get corrections back if there's some bumps in the road or things we just need you to tweak in order to get your MEP like really up to snuff and ready to go. In addition, chapters are only required to complete 3 activities per module now instead of the 6 through 8 that were previously required in past iterations of Overture. And some of the activities that were previously required have been adapted to be completed as discussions with your membership class rather than activities themselves. So this should help you in your planning process and make it a little bit easier to fit MEP lessons into 90 minutes if that's something you're looking at while you're planning. Also, you'll feel less pressure to cut short like good productive conversations you're having with your membership class in order to get your whole lesson in.
And a lot of these changes that are coming to Overture came from you all as active members. So if anybody was at your district conventions and contributed in your membership committees, a lot of these recommendations came there. I think the biggest one was like, there's too many activities, the lessons are too long. Okay, so how can we scale that down and give some time back to you so that you can do some more, like Caitlin said, having meaningful conversations, do your sisterhood activities, practice for your member presentation show, and etc. So make sure that you're staying tuned to our social media, and we will be having our new Overture handbook coming out here soon with all of these updates in there.
Adapting to your MCs. So how to adapt activities. So the activities, meaning the ones explicitly in Overture that recently have been changed, but also as well your activities that your chapter has been doing for your MCs for as traditions. So switching up teaching formats is one of the things that kind of gets hard and lost in translation, especially with certain activities that can tend to be very explicitly directed in one direction. But following the lesson material in class, understanding what that's trying to teach and seeing how you can possibly that activity in order to better convey that that lesson is trying to teach to your MCs helps you better get across to them. Providing lesson material prior to class and this helps you prepare your candidates to know what's going to happen and know everybody can be on the same page of what's going to be getting done during your lessons, and everybody can hold each other accountable, because while you are the membership educator, you are still peers and you guys can help each other out. That's one of the things that I talk about later about respecting your MCs as your peers and not just as like, oh, these are the potentials, maybe, I don't know, will they not, but learning how to switch up the teaching format in order to best accommodate your MCs is going to help you get across them much better. Non-lesson activities like chapter ceremonies, fundraisers, and service events, learning how to incorporate those and put them in your MEP, because if they are required of your candidate, they have to be in the MEP. But maintaining your chapter's traditions doesn't have to stop just because you're doing overture. You can, if you do a nickname for your MCs, you can include how that is given to them in the MEP, and you don't have to stop doing that. If you do bigs and littles, you can keep doing those things so long as they follow our national policies and don't put anybody at risk. All those things are free game. You are able to adapt overture to include whatever you need to keep your chapter's identity and traditions that are within good taste. Ask questions to your counselors, CBAs, and curriculum committee. These are resources to you. They can tell you if something is going to be too risky, or it just doesn't align with the sorority, or if it's completely fine and you should definitely keep doing those things. I know big and little sisters are something that is relatively common among lots of sororities. And so long as it is done in a good, meaningful manner that provides something to your candidates, it is very much encouraged, even if it's not included in overture explicitly. Assessing knowledge. So there are approved quizzes for the modules. I don't know if those have been updated in accordance to the newest version of Overture, but they will be still relatively very relevant to the material. And we have these approved quizzes because while it is required to know that your candidates are understanding the material, we don't encourage doing anything extraneous, like they have to be within reason. If you can get your satisfaction knowing that your candidates are learning by a discussion, that is completely valid. If you feel like you're still not getting that from them, then you could do the quizzes. But again, those approved quizzes, so that we know that you aren't testing for something random, like, oh, I said this one random Easter egg, and if you didn't get it, you weren't paying attention, you're cut. We don't do that. But those are quizzes, discussions, anything you need to do in order to know that your candidates are catching it for their benefit as well as for the chapter's benefit when they become sisters.
And an update for that also, the only quizzes that you can use if you choose to do quizzes are the ones that are provided. I'm gonna say that again. You cannot make your own quizzes. The only quiz that you can make is the one that has to do with your chapter history, which is module 7. But other than that, your quizzes have to be the ones that were provided through Overture National Organization. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, so one of the most common variations that we see within membership classes that would require you to kind of adapt what you're doing is size of membership class. Sometimes you're bringing in a class of 7 or 8 or sometimes more new members depending on what size your chapter is, while other times you may only have a class of 1 or 2 membership candidates. Thankfully, a lot of the activities within Overture can be really easily adapted to fit large or small classes, and one of the best ways to look at that is by class discussions. So if you're working with a big class, you can choose to select specific questions from the Overture module to discuss at length with the whole group during lesson time, and then maybe encourage the class to think about other ones between classes, maybe even encourage to talk about those questions with other active members so they're still getting that, but you're not eating up class time doing it. Or on another hand, you can split your large class into smaller groups and have them discuss the questions amongst themselves, and then have them share their bigger points and some like really great bigger points that they've come across within their discussions and share those with the whole group. On the other hand, if you're working with a smaller group, it's pretty common that a lot of these smaller classes are on the quieter side. So if this is the case with your membership class, you can have them answer questions in a written format and bring their answers back next class. You can also think about inviting active members into your lesson to help bolster discussion a little bit more if you're working with a small class. The only thing I would caution about in that case is that be mindful about how many actives you are bringing into your lesson, especially with a smaller class. You don't want to overwhelm your class. So actives can be a great way to bolster discussion. Just make sure you're moderating that as the membership educator and being mindful about what the actives are doing in your lesson, basically. A lot of these concepts for how to adapt to class sizes can be applied to other overture activities in addition to the class discussions as well. For example, one of the technology integration activities found in Module 3 involves reviewing the Programs and Initiatives page on the national website. If you look at that page, there is a lot of information. It goes into depth on a lot of our national programs, and they're all really great, but it could take a long time to go through the whole thing as a large group, and honestly, it could probably get a little bit dull if it's just you as the membership educator kind of clicking through the pages. It's not a great way for the membership class to really get a taste of what programs and initiatives we offer. So a better way to do that is if you're looking at a large group, you can split them up and then assign each person or a group to review 1 or 2 programs, have them summarize what it's all about, and then have them share that back out with the group. If you're working with a really small group, have them explore a program that really speaks to them and something that they could find very valuable, and have them look at that more in depth, and then they can share back some interesting things that they learned as a whole group. Tackling it this way, splitting it up, is a more effective use of your time. It gets your whole group involved in the activity and looking at what we're doing on our national website, while also getting them more engaged with the activity in a hands-on way. For things like artistic connections, like in Module 3, there's an activity that encourages MCs to create a social media post that demonstrates how they portray the fourth purpose of providing worthwhile service to the band. You can you can have large groups work on portions of activities like that at home and then have them bring them into class. Or if you have a small membership class on your hands, you can have them all tackle it together as a team. Making these really small changes to how you tackle these activities can help your class engage with the content in a more hands-on way, while ensuring that everyone is learning the material by experiencing it, and it's a good way to adapt no matter what your class sizes look like.
Questions to ask when assessing needs. How do you take notes in the classroom? So the way that your candidates can pay attention, sometimes it can be just simply taking notes. In your workbook, if you print it out for them, there's spaces provided for them to take notes. If they choose to write their own notes in a separate notebook, that is up to them. Just making sure that they are keeping up with the material, because while most things are in the workbook, it engages them more to be able to write down some of the extra things, especially for the district and chapter things, which may not be explicitly in the workbook because they change from district to chapter to district and chapter. So how does it read through material? How does it help to read through material before it is taught to you? If you're going into overture blind and you're reading as you go, you might misunderstand something, and so the same thing can happen with your candidates. Having them know what material is coming up, having them kind of glance at the workbook also helps. Everybody being mindful and prepared for class is going to make the 90-minute session, which may seem long, much more easier and consumable for both your membership educator as well as your MCs. The material can be dense, but if you prefer to say it in a different way, but you understand that you're saying explicitly what is being taught, then you can change up the wording for your candidates. It just helps you understand so that you can better teach. And it helps your candidates then when they have questions for you, they can ask and you can answer much more confidently. They feel more confident and asking you those questions because they do receive answers that are much more explicit. And when you keep getting asked a question and your answer is I don't know, I'll ask, you kind of discourage them slightly from asking those questions because the answer is you don't know. So it's better for everyone around the table when teaching overture to be prepared, reading through the materials and making sure that these things are prepared and understood beforehand. Does it help to have slides printed out so you can take notes? If your candidates may feel anxious about writing every detail down, then you can help them out by having printed slides, making sure that they are feel confident that they can get the material that they need from you. This can be just the slides printed out. There are there are presentations already provided through the website so that you can use these nationally approved presentations. But if you also have your own, those can also be printed out. They can be made specific to your chapter, decorated however you like. And again, the resources that you use during your during Overture should be accessible to you and your candidates in whatever format they need that will help them best. Describe a time when teacher when you, it felt sorry. Describe a time when you felt a teacher really did something to help you learn. So this helps not only specifically for you to understand how you learn as a membership educator, but also just asking the question maybe at the end of module 0 or the beginning of module 1, just so you know, maybe there's something that really helps some of your MCs connect. And if it's an anecdote, which I may tell too many anecdotes, but that's just the way I learned, and I tend to kind of prefer that route if I'm seeing I'm not getting through with people. But understanding if your MCs prefer anecdotes, something more hands-on, maybe a example, so that you can give them a better idea of what they're learning and how they're going to be employing that as sisters. And of course, assessing needs isn't just knowing like how people learn, but so much as well as like accessibility. We have resources for that in the national level, but as well as knowing your resources, which they should be in your MEP, knowing your resources on your campus and in your area so that you know what you may be able to help your candidates with. If somebody's deaf or hard of hearing, being able to like get access to interpreters if they need them, just being able to reach your resources, knowing the needs, not just learning wise, but accessibility wise. And sometimes even that as simple as changing a font for somebody who has a little bit of trouble reading with for whatever reason, just changing the font can do so much more if you are open to like asking your candidates, hey, is something working, is something not working? And it is always going to be a constant struggle to know if you're in that sweet spot of this works for everyone. And sometimes it may not be exactly perfect, but you will be working your best to know what your MCs need from you and trying your best to do that. And there are resources on your campus and the national. Ask your counselors, ask your past VPMs. Knowing those resources is vital to being able to help when some needs are not being met. And how do you think we can best teach you the material? Coming back to the how to teach that. Again, there are some general statements on whether you're a kinetic learner, an auditory learner, a visual learner, just the different ways that we can teach you. All these things come down to knowing how best to teach those materials in order to best achieve the learning that we want from our MCs.
Yeah, so in some cases, in terms of like you have a big class or a small class, or like Julia just talked about, assessing the needs and the learning styles of your class, that's stuff you can do ahead of time and adapt your overture activities before you start your MEP. But there are some less concrete things that you can't really predict about your class ahead of time when it comes to adapting your overture lessons. Every class, if you found as you're a membership educator, or you will find if you're going to be a membership educator for the upcoming year, is that every class of new membership candidates has their own vibe, and they may respond better to some educational approaches than others. So in these cases, you may find it helpful to alter your approach and some of your plans during the membership education process. And that's really okay, because your job as a membership educator is to teach your MCs in a way that's most effective for them. And sometimes that looks like making some inflate changes to your plan on the way after you've already started teaching them. So during some of your first lessons with a new class, it may be helpful to take note of what's working for them and what's not. So think about things like, what are they responding really well to? What parts of the lesson make them really excited and eager to participate? Are there parts where it's a little bit harder to get them engaged? So Take note of this as you're teaching them in some of your early lessons and respond accordingly to this real-time feedback that you're getting from your class. Every class that you get in is a little bit different, so don't be afraid to adapt to them and grow with them as you're teaching them. So sometimes adapting your lessons may include changing activities you had planned on doing when you originally submit your MEP, and that's totally okay. It's not like your MEP is something that's like solidified in cement or anything, but if you are planning on changing an activity after you've already started that you had originally planned on doing, just shoot an email over to your district counselors and your district VPM just to let them know the update that you're making a little tweak to your original membership plan. Yeah, so we talked a lot about Overture being a standardized curriculum, that it's based on how you teach it rather than what you're teaching. You can also make it your own by submitting supplemental activities to add to the education process. So when you're submitting activities, the really important thing to remember is that every supplemental activity should be something that is connecting back to a purpose or a quality or something you're already learning, and it should basically enhance what the MCs are already learning within the Overture curriculum. So in order to submit one of these activities, what you're going to do is you would go to tbsigma.org/overture, click on the box that says membership education plan form, submission form, my mistake, and then answer the following questions for each activity. They're located here on the slide, so you're going to include things like the name of the activity, a little description about the activity itself, and rationale for why you want to implement that into your plan. If it's going to be replacing one of the learning activities within Overture, and if you are doing that, make sure you indicate what module and lesson that would be in, a total runtime for the activity in minutes and hours, what materials you plan on needing, and any scripts, diagrams, plans that you will be using in the activity. From there, your activity submissions will be reviewed by your district VPM, the district counselors, and the curriculum committee, and they will provide feedback to you on that activity if it's needed. And this form should be completed by August 15th if you're using it for a fall class, and by December 1st if you're using it for a spring class. What's super important to remember is that any activity not included in this document for consideration by the people that I just named, they can't be used as part of your MEP.
Do's and don'ts of Overture. So these are just going to be a couple examples, but just kind of giving you an idea of what it is you're working with when you're doing the MEP and when you're working with the Overture. So we mentioned before that you can shorten or lengthen your MEP timeline from anywhere between 4 weeks to 12 weeks. Within those, you can do whatever is most comfortable for your school. If your school is only in session for a couple weeks, not a full 12, you don't want to be doing the MEP, the membership process past your semester length or your trimester length. Of course, if you choose to go shorter or longer, just make sure you don't exclude any of the modules. All the modules are necessary. You can't just pick and choose, oh, I'm doing a 4-week process, so I only need to do 4 of the modules. It is all mandatory and you work within that. If you need to do 2 meetings per week, you can do that. Just don't exclude any of the material, but you can change the length of the process from your starting recruitment to the initiation of your actives. We do encourage active and candidate interactions through interviews and or big sisters. And of course, we want your MCs to feel like they're going to be sisters, not just that they're in this limbo space constantly. So you want to encourage them to mingle with your actives, to in addition to having to do this long Overture process, which is necessary to prepare them to be the best sisters they can be, that they feel like they're not just, you know, will they, won't they? So there are the interviews that are allowed. There are some guidelines, I believe, in Overture. Siobhan mentions that all the activities that are going to be required of these modules, you do also have to do those. You can't shorten the modules themselves either. All the material that is necessary, and that does not change when you change the length of the process. But Another thing you don't want to do is, just because there is a standard education does not mean there is a standard sister. So don't impose a singular standard of sisterhood. We have all this information so that we can specialize. If somebody prefers service and that's where they're going to put all their energy in, let them do that. If somebody prefers musicianship and they want to put more energy into that, let them do that. Not every sister is going to look the same, but so long as we prepare them the same way, they can be the better sisters they can be with what they choose to focus on. Of course, that doesn't mean that somebody only has to do one aspect or another. We do expect our sisters to generally be within every area of what our sisterhood is, but you can't use overture as an excuse to limit them in any capacity. Do understand that the function of what is being taught, i.e. history serves to understand the larger trajectory of inclusivity and diversity. We see with knowing history, especially with 75 years behind us now, and hopefully another 75 years in the future, we see where we came from, where we're going, understanding how that is the purpose of learning history, not just so that, oh, I am forcing you to memorize things. It helps you understand the value of what you're learning. This isn't just history, but also learning the different the eights and fives. Sorry, I was going to say something. The eights and fives, knowing that while they are ideals, they are not limitations, nor are they anything that would exclude you from being a good sister. The purpose of them is to point us in the best direction possible, putting our best foot forward. So understanding the function of these things are to make us better sisters. And that helps us understand why we do overture, helps us be less against the idea of doing a whole 12-week process if that's what your chapter does. Understanding all the information gets you to a better place education-wise. And treating your MCs like fellow sisters and always accept title during the process, I have personally seen as a very helpful thing, because if they're constantly going to be the others, the ones that don't know anything, they're not in the secrets, they're not going to feel as included, they're not going to feel as welcome until like you suddenly give them their initiation and they're like suddenly sisters and suddenly everything changes, but it didn't, because they were still MCs that didn't know anything. So in all ways but the name, typically we see our MCs as being people who would already be capable of wearing letters. And so when you're teaching them, do not talk to them as though they are not going to be sisters. Talk to them as they are preparing to be those best sisters. And don't commit to non-mandatory activities and as a way to circumvent them being approved. If it is being provided to your MCs in any ways, it has to be in the MEP, and there's no way to circumvent that. Just because you're like, oh, it's not mandatory, doesn't mean it's actually not mandatory. If it is being provided to your MCs in any facility, in any way, even if it's not mandatory, it has to be included. I see a question in the chat. When did Overture as a newly recharted chapter? I want to talk to my chapter's alumni, so I want to see what some disconnect may be. I might be wrong about this. I believe my chapter was doing the pilot for Overture in 2018. And I believe it was officially approved on the national level at the National Convention in 2019. Can somebody correct me on that?
That's correct.
You're
And
good.
yeah, so yeah, Malia, I think your chapter was installed in last year, 2021. So some of your alumni, or most of your alumni, would not know anything about it and what it looks like. And so yeah, that's and with it, we're actually developing some resources that we call it Overture for Adults. And by adults, I mean like alumni and directors of bands and sponsors, for them to understand what the point of it is. And if you want, if they have any questions, or you're getting a lot of weird commentary back from them about it, feel free to send them our way, and we'll give them some little bit more information on what Overture is, how it's helping your chapter, and how they can help you to execute it.
Yeah, so now that we've gone through a lot of ways of how to kind of adapt Overture to fit your needs within this kind of standardized curriculum, we want to open up the floor and maybe discuss some scenarios of what you would do in some of these instances and how you would adapt Overture and what you would do as a VPM to make it kind of fit your needs. So first up, what would you do if you had a class of maybe older MCs? I know a lot of them tend to be freshmen, but coming from my own chapter, I've found that a lot of our membership classes actually skew a little bit older. So what would you do if you had a class that contained a lot of older MCs?
Feel free to unmute if you want to answer, or you can send it in the chat and we'll read it. We're trying to have a conversation here. Thank you.
Yeah. Also, since the questions are on the screen, we don't have to go down the list. If there's one that really speaks to you that you want to talk about, please feel free to raise your hand and unmute. How would you handle any of these as a membership educator trying to adapt Overture to fit your needs? Yeah, we have an answer from Sarah within the chat. They said for older members, focus a lot on discussion and the whys behind the info. They may be familiar with concepts, so seeing why that's important to sorority. I think that's a great way to do it. Something that you find a lot is that if you're the same age as the membership class you're bringing in, it feels kind of weird to talk at them and teach them. So I think that's a really great way to get really in depth about why all this info is important and why it matters to the sorority as a whole.
With an older class, it can also be really helpful. They might have a lot of ideas about what Tau Beta Sigma is because maybe they've seen you and the sisters around in your band through the past couple years. So it can be to kind of add on to that discussion can be a really great time to, talk about some of the things that they've seen and maybe give some more background or provide a little bit more context to what the sorority does outside of just in your band as well.
Yeah, I think that's really great. We have a comment from Adeline in the chat that said at Beta, we had a few older MCs this year. We didn't treat them any differently from the other MCs, and we did a lot of discussion-based concepts and activities. I think that's a really great way to kind of adapt to your older MCs. Sarah again says, also providing support to those younger MCs, older ones tend to know the actors already. That's really true, especially at what Megan said, a lot of older MCs have been in the band for a couple of years, so they might know the sisters already. So I think providing that extra support to those younger MCs is a really great way to make sure everyone is feeling really included in the process. Julie, do you want to get that one that's in the chat? If you could see it. Okay.
Ashley Moss. For a more reserved class, anonymous discussion or written responses allow them to participate without speaking, as well as giving them questions ahead of time to allow them to prepare responses, which helps decrease anxiety. Sometimes maybe you feel like something's a little bit not the best worded. Giving them the opportunity to respond in writing often helps them to alleviate some of that distress of having to talk in the classroom. So if you have a class that is much more reserved, it is a very good way to encourage participation.
Absolutely.
Again, from Sarah, older members involved in the past actives have come to every lesson session and participate in partner discussions with MCs, support them in learning the info. So getting your older members involved sometimes can be difficult if your MCs and your membership educator are not meeting at the same time, but encouraging them to participate in discussions helps give the MCs that better like idea of what it is to be an active sister. You're not getting just limited information from your membership educator, because regardless of how much you try, sometimes you can't say everything. And it's really good to involve your actives with your MCs.
It looks like we got another chat from Alexis, who says, if you're a VPM who identifies as an extrovert, it might be good food for thought to talk with others who are not like you so you can understand how others think, process, and communicate information. I think that's an awesome point. Really good to communicate with other members of your chapter who might not be extroverts to kind of get a better idea of how to handle that. Jamboard, I love Jamboard. Yeah, it's a really great way for anonymous posting in a more reserved class. I love Jamboard so much.
I love the comment about getting your, like asking your active members to join in on the membership classes. I know some chapters like require you to join to like help with activities, but again, kind of what we talked about in the last session, like this is a team project, this membership education. And so your older, actives, either junior, senior level, or even ones that just came through, having them be involved in the membership process helps the membership candidates feel less isolated, and also helps them to join in on the discussion, because a lot of the discussions that we have in Overture are things like ask an active, like connected to the chapter, and who knows those answer better than the active members of the chapter. So tell them to join, give them some instructions on how to participate, but tell them to join.
So Reagan said, I wish like if my class was really reserved, I would first make sure that the environment feels safe, healthy, and non-judgmental. I'm definitely an extrovert, so I would try to keep the energy locked down a bit and let the members speak up when they're comfortable, maybe by starting in small groups or written answers as previously stated. So that's really cool. Definitely making sure that your classroom is an environment that feels safe and healthy and non-judgmental is going to benefit your class so much. I know something simple is making sure it's a room the same space every time, so that there's nothing new that's going to be distracting or always trying to figure out where you're at. So just setting up that room and making sure that you set that clear discussion and know that it is safe, healthy, and non-judgmental. I really like that. And while it's kind of like, if you have introverts, you want to tone it down, I wouldn't limit yourself to toning it down just for their sakes, because I know that it's kind of like a little bit intimidating, but maybe ease them up to your level. They don't have to meet you there, but they can be comfortable with you as you are without you having to tamper yourself.
Absolutely.
Something for the incorporating more of our chapter into this process that I think is in the Overture handbook, but we have specific members come and speak when it's something that's relevant. So like the people who attended like district convention or national convention, we try to get them to present that portion of the slide so they can like put pictures in from convention and talk about it, or like have our VP of special projects help them with their candidate service project and like really work with them through that.
That's a really good. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a really great way, because it's one thing to like sit down and like look at a PowerPoint all about district conventions. Another thing to have someone come in and talk a lot about their experience at district convention. It really brings to life a lot of like the really great things you get out of going to district convention. So absolutely.
At the beginning of every module, again, that is where it will give you a recommendation. Oh, these people are recommended attendees. It could be your VPM, it could be a treasurer, it can just be somebody who went to a convention. And those are really good attendees just so I can participate more specifically to the conversation of that module. And that helps benefits that, again, your membership educator is not the only voice you're hearing from. You're also getting opinions from everybody else, because maybe your membership educator is gung-ho about like all the service, but they're not a music major, so they can't give you as much of a perspective in that direction. And so having other actives participate in that degree helps, you know, fix anything that may be lacking from your membership educator for no fault of themselves.
Yeah, in the interest of time, maybe we want to get one more, and then we can move ahead to our last couple slides. If anyone else has anything they would like to add. All right, we got McKenna, who said, to get actives to come to new membership meetings, I try not to use words like required and have, so they don't view it like a chore. Instead, I use words like to and want. I think that's a really great way. It's something really small that you can switch up in how you're presenting it to encourage people to really want to show up and get to know these new members and really be involved in their education process. Okie dokie. Thank you guys so much for participating in those scenarios. It was really great to kind of hear from everyone and kind of get their feedback. And that's how we grow as membership educators, is from hearing from other people and moving forward and learning. All right, so submitting feedback. So I think Siobhan mentioned a little bit earlier, Overture is updated annually by the curriculum committee. They meet, they go through, they get feedback from district conventions and just conversations with you guys. Like Siobhan said, some of the changes that have happened to Overture, even coming as soon as in a couple weeks, have come from conversations with active members. So if you have any comments, concerns, complaints, what you think really works, what you think really doesn't work, send them an email at overture@tbsigma.org. Get in touch with your district VPM. There's tons of people who are really willing to hear what you have to say about membership education, and we would love to hear your feedback. Any questions about anything that we didn't hit on so far? Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, if you think of any questions after you leave here, here's a whole slew of people that you can contact. Julie and I are listed right up top, and then there's also the emails from all of the other district VPMs if you would like to ask them questions or just reach out and chat. I always love talking to people from my district, so please feel free to shoot me an email with any of your membership questions or anything along those lines. You could also reach out to the curriculum committee, like we just said, if you have anything along those lines. Yeah, feel free to reach out to us whenever you need. Yep, I think that's, Julie, do you have anything else you would like to add? I think that's pretty much all we got.
Yeah, that's pretty much all from us. Thank you so much for attending this workshop and for letting me talk to you guys. And thank you, Caitlin, for working with me. It was really nice working with you, with somebody across the nation.
Oh my God, yes. Thank you so much, Julia, for really working with me on this and putting this together. It was really cool to be, I think Siobhan said in one of our first meetings, we are collaborating from basically opposite districts if you like look at a map. So that was a really fun experience. And thank you guys so much for showing up on this Saturday morning, afternoon. I know we're in different time zones, and really learning about membership education with us this morning.